It was supposed to be the happiest night of his life. The lights, the laughter, the promises whispered under the stars. But hours before the wedding night, the groom's world shattered. A single phone call, a trembling voice on the other end, and a video that no man should ever have to see. Because in that moment, everything Daniel thought he knew about love, about loyalty, died. Tonight, we unravel the story of a groom who caught his bride in the most unforgivable betrayal imaginable, and the best friend who destroyed everything in one night. Stay to the end, because what Daniel did after that discovery changed everything. How does love turn into deceit? How does someone look you in the eyes, promise forever, and then sleep with the one person you trusted most? Who's really guilty here? The woman who betrayed her vows before the wedding night? Or the best friend who crossed a line that can never be uncrossed? And most haunting of all, was this betrayal spontaneous? Or had it been happening for months, right under his nose? This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about obsession, about control, and about the one decision that drew a line between love and revenge. Daniel Atwood wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't rich, but he was good. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, who held doors open, who believed in forever. He met Isabella Cruz 5 years ago at a charity event. She was radiant. The kind of beauty that didn't just turn heads, it stopped time. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his anchor. And then there was Michael, Daniel's best friend since childhood. They'd built everything together. Shared secrets, dreams, failures. The three of them, Daniel, Isabella, and Michael, were inseparable. Vacations, parties, late night talks about life and love. Daniel trusted them both completely, almost too much. As the wedding approached, Daniel was blind with excitement. He'd spent months planning every detail, from the color of the flowers to the playlist for their first dance. But what he didn't know was that behind every loving smile, there were stolen glances, hidden messages, and secrets buried just deep enough to escape suspicion. It started small. A shared joke between Isabella and Michael. A quick text that Daniel brushed off as friendly. Then longer messages. Inside jokes that excluded him. Friends warned him. They said, "Don't you think they're a little too close?" He laughed it off. Because Daniel believed that love, real love, was unbreakable. But love, as he would learn, can be the cruelest illusion of all. 1 week before the wedding, Michael started acting strange. He skipped Daniel's calls, showed up late to rehearsals. And Isabella, she seemed distant, nervous. Daniel thought it was pre-wedding stress. He couldn't have been more wrong, because while he was writing his vows, the woman he was about to marry was writing messages to his best friend. And in just a few days, Daniel would find out exactly what those messages meant. The night before the wedding, the city was alive. Guests were flying in, champagne was chilling, and Daniel couldn't sleep. His mind was racing with vows, excitement, and what he believed would be the beginning of forever. But somewhere across town, forever was being rewritten. At 11:47 p.m., Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. You should know. Attached, a video file. No context. No name. Just a notification that would destroy him. He hesitated for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. Then curiosity turned into catastrophe. The video opened to a dimly lit hotel room, and there, unmistakably, was Isabella, laughing, whispering, and beside her, Michael, Daniel's best friend, his best man. At first, he couldn't move. He replayed it, again and again. The angle, the laughter, the intimacy. There was no doubt. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a rumor. It was betrayal, raw, undeniable, filmed. Daniel dropped the phone. He couldn't breathe. The walls of his hotel suite seemed to close in, crushing the air out of him. Everything he believed, gone. In a second, he tried to call Isabella. No answer. He called Michael, straight to voicemail. Minutes later, he drove. He didn't know where he was going. only that he needed the truth. The GPS history on Isabella's phone led to a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. Room 214. Check-in 2 hours earlier. Name on the reservation, Michael H. Daniel's hands trembled as he walked down the hallway. The world felt like a dream, slow, silent, unreal. Then he stopped at the door. He could hear muffled laughter, Isabella's voice, and Michael's. His chest tightened. He knocked. Once. Twice. The laughter stopped. Moments later, the door opened. Isabella's smile vanished when she saw him. She was wearing his university sweatshirt. Behind her, Michael appeared, shirtless, stunned. No words were spoken. There was no screaming, no violence. Just 3 people frozen in the collapse of everything they once were. Daniel turned around and walked away, down the corridor, out into the rain. Because sometimes silence screams louder than any words ever could. At 2:15 a.m., Daniel sat in his car, staring at nothing. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just sat there. Then he did something no one expected. He called off the wedding. Quietly, methodically, he contacted the venue, the guests, the vendors, all before sunrise. By morning, every detail was canceled. But he didn't tell anyone why. Not yet, because Daniel wasn't just broken. He was calculating. And what he did next would make national headlines. By sunrise, Isabella woke up to chaos. The wedding planner, her mother, everyone asking why Daniel had disappeared. She tried calling him. 53 missed calls. No response. Then came the message. Just one sentence. Check the wedding page. Her heart dropped. She opened the website, the same one Daniel had built to share their story, their photos, their journey. Only this time, there was a new video uploaded, the same one Daniel had received hours earlier. And within minutes, it was everywhere. Family, friends, co-workers. Everyone saw it. The woman once celebrated as the perfect bride, now trending under #weddingbetrayal. Her face splashed across every feed. Michael's, too. Daniel didn't say a word publicly. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. But behind the silence, he was unraveling. Because revenge, as he would soon learn, comes with a price of its own. By morning, the story had escaped the confines of the wedding hall. It was no longer just Daniel, Isabella, and Michael. It was the world. Screens lit up with their faces. The bride, the groom, the best friend, the betrayal. It spread like wildfire, hashtags, reaction videos, podcasts dissecting every second of footage. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But no one knew the full truth. Daniel disappeared. He turned off his phone, deleted his social media, and vanished from his own narrative. For days, no one knew where he was. Some said he'd left the country. Others believed he was planning something darker. Isabella, on the other hand, was cornered. Her phone never stopped ringing. Friends who once toasted her love story now avoided her calls. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. Is that her? She's the one from the video. She cheated before the wedding. She tried to explain, tried to control the story. But once the internet takes hold of your truth, it stops belonging to you. Michael was the first to speak publicly. He released a statement, short, calculated. What happened was a mistake. We were both emotional. It meant nothing. But to Daniel, it meant everything. Years of friendship, loyalty, trust, gone in a single night. What no one realized was that Daniel wasn't silent out of weakness. He was silent because he was building something. None of them could stop once it began. 3 weeks later, a new video appeared online. It wasn't uploaded by Daniel, or at least not from his account. The video opened with the same wedding photo. Daniel and Isabella smiling in front of a lake. Then the screen glitched, the image distorted, and text appeared. You only saw part of the truth. Within hours, the clip went viral. It wasn't just a re-upload of the affair footage. It contained new angles, different timestamps. Someone else had been there that night, recording, watching, And that raised a question the world hadn't asked yet. If Daniel didn't film it, who did? Speculation turned to suspicion. Was Daniel being framed? Was someone close to him feeding the chaos? Theories filled comment sections. Maybe it was a setup. Maybe Daniel hired someone. Maybe Isabella's ex was involved. Nobody knew, not even the police, because now it wasn't just gossip. It was potential evidence. A formal complaint was filed, not by Daniel, by Isabella. She claimed the footage had been stolen from her phone. Private content leaked without consent. She accused Daniel of revenge posting, and for the first time since the betrayal, he responded through his lawyer. My client did not record, distribute, or authorize the release of any footage. That statement sent shockwaves, because if Daniel didn't release it, and Isabella didn't, then who did? Investigators began tracing IP addresses, timestamps, and metadata from the viral clips. They found multiple upload sources, different cities, different devices. It looked less like a leak and more like an operation. The public lost interest in the truth. They wanted drama. But beneath the noise, something darker was brewing. At this point, even Michael started receiving threats. Anonymous calls, messages saying, "You'll be next." He moved out of town, leaving no forwarding address. Meanwhile, Daniel resurfaced. He was seen entering a police station, alone, calm, collected. He requested access to the case files on the leak. And when detectives refused, he gave them a name that hadn't appeared anywhere online. The name was Evelyn Harper, a photographer, hired by the couple for their pre-wedding shoot. She had access to everything, phones, photos, private sessions. But a week before the wedding, Evelyn disappeared from the team chat. No explanation. Until now, detectives found Evelyn's address. Vacant. No forwarding record. Only a single item left behind on the kitchen counter. A flash drive labeled The Truth. When they plugged it in, it contained hundreds of files. Videos, photos, audio clips. Every single one tied to Daniel, Isabella, and Michael. Some recorded months before the affair. Someone had been watching them for a very long time. The footage showed hotel lobbies, conversations, dinner dates, moments no one realized were being filmed. And in one video, Evelyn could be heard speaking to someone, her voice low, secretive. "Don't worry, once it's online, they'll destroy each other." The voice on the other end was distorted, untraceable, but it sounded familiar. For Daniel, the betrayal had become something more. It was no longer just about love. It was about manipulation, control, and a terrifying idea that none of it had been an accident, because someone wanted this story to happen, and they had orchestrated it from the shadow. As detectives dug deeper, one question began to haunt them. What if the affair wasn't betrayal? What if it was a trap? If you made it this far, comment, "I'm still here," because in the next chapter, the truth unravels in ways no one could have predicted. The hidden manipulator is revealed. A shocking confession changes everything. And Daniel learns the truth about who really set the entire betrayal in motion. When detectives combed through the mountain of files found in Evelyn's apartment, most of it was what they expected. Footage, invoices, fragments of the project she and Michael had built together. But one file, one single video buried in a hidden folder, changed everything. It was titled simply, Test Sequence 03.mp4. No labels, no description, just a timestamp. 3 months before the wedding. When investigators opened it, the screen flickered. Static, then focus. The familiar interior of Daniel and Isabella's home appeared. Dimly lit, intimate, and heavy with tension. The camera wasn't placed openly. It wasn't a tripod or an interview setup. It was handheld, hidden. The lens peered through a narrow gap in a half-closed door, just wide enough to see into the living room. Evelyn's breathing could be heard faintly behind the camera, unsteady, nervous. And inside that frame, Daniel and Isabella. They were standing across from each other, motionless at first, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Then the argument began. The words were muffled, distorted by the door, but the emotion was unmistakable. Exhaustion, frustration. pain that had nowhere else to go. Daniel's hands were clenched. Isabella's eyes red, tired. The conversation wasn't violent, but it was breaking. For several minutes, all that could be heard were half-finished sentences, accusations that died before they reached full form. And then, one line cut through everything, clear, sharp, echoing like a wound reopening. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" Isabella's voice, shaking, but steady enough to reveal the truth beneath it. Fear. Not fear of him, but fear of losing what they had built. Daniel didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at her, jaw tight, silence screaming louder than any words could. Then slowly he turned away and picked up his phone. The camera zoomed in slightly. On the screen, a contact name appeared. One letter. Just M. He started typing. A message short enough to fit in a single breath. Then he hit send. The silence that followed was unbearable. Isabella lowered her gaze, tears catching the dim light from a nearby lamp. She walked out of frame, and the sound of a door closing echoed faintly in the distance. The clip ended abruptly. Black screen. Timestamp confirmed the date, March 17th. 3 months before everything fell apart. For investigators, that single video opened a new dimension to the story. Until that moment, the assumption had been simple. Michael and Isabella's affair began weeks before the wedding, during a period of emotional distance. But this video suggested something different, something planned, something watched. It proved that Evelyn had access to Daniel's home far earlier than anyone realized. It also proved that Michael knew, because when detectives cross-referenced Daniel's phone records from that same night, they found a text message, sent exactly 9:42 p.m. To Michael, the message read, "She's starting to question everything." Michael had replied less than a minute later, "Don't worry, I'll talk to her tomorrow." That was it, just 2 messages. But those few words turned the investigation upside down. It meant that Michael wasn't just involved. He was inside the relationship, coaching, influencing, manipulating, all under the guise of friendship. It meant that when Daniel reached out for advice, he was unknowingly feeding the very man who was orchestrating his downfall. And when Isabella confided in Michael later, thinking he was a neutral ear, she too was playing to the same web. Every message, every argument, every tear, all of it was being recorded, predicted, and used. The discovery of that video reframed everything that came after. The affair, the leaks, the betrayal. It wasn't random. It was engineered. And Evelyn's footage, that single clip, became the missing piece that tied it all together. When detectives replayed the video one final time, one of them asked a question that hung in the room like smoke. Why was she filming this? No one answered. Maybe it was Michael's instruction. Maybe it was Evelyn's curiosity. Or maybe on some level, she wanted to leave behind a record, a trace of how it really began. Because in that shaky, stolen footage, through that cracked door, you can see everything. 2 people losing faith in each other. 1 man losing control. And another man waiting for his chance to destroy them both. The discovery changed everything. What had once seemed like chaos, an affair, a scandal, a shattered engagement, was suddenly revealed to be something else entirely. Not a random act of passion, not a moment of weakness, but a plan, a carefully constructed descent, orchestrated by the very person Daniel had trusted the most. Michael, his best friend, his confidant, the man who had stood beside him through every milestone, his graduation, his first promotion, his engagement toast. And now, the same man who had quietly built the noose around his neck. Michael hadn't just betrayed Daniel with Isabella. He had designed the betrayal, piece by piece, move by move. The affair, the video leak, the anonymous messages that tore them apart. Every one of them was part of a larger machine. A machine fueled not by lust, but by envy, by the slow, corrosive kind of hatred that hides behind a smile. A darkness years in the making. When the police dug deeper, the puzzle began to rearrange itself. Investigators traced a series of suspicious transactions, small at first, then larger, all flowing through an unregistered business called Lens Light Media. On paper, it was a boutique photography company. In reality, it was a shell a front Michael had built to move money quietly. The recipient, Evelyn, a freelance videographer Daniel had hired months before to film parts of the wedding documentary. The dates matched perfectly. The same weeks when the intimate videos were captured. The same nights the secret cameras had been switched on. And when the police finally found Evelyn, not in the city but hundreds of miles away, living under a new name, the truth began to surface. She was exhausted, terrified, and broke when detectives confronted her with the evidence. She didn't even try to deny it. Her voice trembled. "He told me it was a documentary project," she said. "A story about betrayal, love, and human weakness. I didn't know it was real until it was too late. But deep down, she did know. They always know." And by the time she realized how far it had gone, how much pain it had caused, it no longer mattered. The story was already out there. Millions of strangers had already chosen sides. The damage was irreversible. When Daniel was called in for questioning, he didn't speak for a long time. The detectives laid out the evidence in front of him. Screenshots, bank transfers, recordings. The betrayal was no longer rumor. It was documented, time-stamped, undeniable. For almost 2 full minutes, Daniel said nothing, just stared at the photographs spread across the table like a timeline of ruin. Then, quietly, almost himself, he said something that made every investigator in that room pause. "He told me once," Daniel said, "that I was living the life he was supposed to have." And in that moment, motive came into focus like a cruel photograph snapping into place. Michael had always been there, always watching, always clapping, always smiling, the perfect best friend. At Daniel's graduation, he'd been the first to cheer. At Daniel's engagement dinner, he'd raise his glass higher than anyone else. But behind every smile was jealousy. Behind every toast, resentment. Because to Michael, Daniel wasn't a friend. He was a mirror, one that reflected everything he wasn't. Every success Daniel celebrated was a reminder of Michael's own failures. Every laugh, every kiss, every headline was salt in a wound that never healed. And so, he decided to destroy the reflection. The affair wasn't passion. It was precision, calculated, targeted manipulation. Michael didn't seduce Isabella out of love. He studied her. He learned her. He knew her insecurities, the way she doubted herself when Daniel grew distant, the moment she felt unseen. He knew Daniel's patterns too, the late nights, the quiet ambition that often left no room for reassurance. And he used those cracks like a sculptor carving into marble. At first, it was harmless, casual text jokes, friendly meetups, but each one was recorded. Each one pushed her a little closer to the line, until finally she crossed it. And when she did, Michael made sure it was captured. Every word, every glance, every touch. He recorded it all under the guise of an art project, a twisted experiment in emotional truth. He called it the human condition, but it wasn't art. It was revenge disguised as philosophy. When he finally had enough footage, he didn't leak it himself. He didn't need to. He gave it to Evelyn, told her to upload it when the timing feels poetic. And she did, through a fake account, an anonymous username. A single link sent to Daniel's private inbox. No caption, no explanation, just a message that read, "You deserve the truth." Everything was scripted, every heartbreak, every reaction choreographed, a performance meant for one audience only. But when it went viral, when millions began to watch, analyze, and comment, Michael didn't stop it. He fed it. He watched in the shadows as Daniel's life unraveled, the friendships, the career, the love story. He watched the man he envied most fall in real time, because for Michael, that was the art, watching a man crumble, not in silence, but under the gaze of the entire world. And in that twisted logic, he found satisfaction. What began as friendship had turned into obsession. What looked like betrayal was actually a slow, deliberate execution of trust. Daniel had once believed he understood heartbreak. He didn't, because heartbreak ends. This didn't. This was the kind of pain that doesn't fade with time. The kind that rewrites the story of who you thought you were. And as the detectives closed the case file, one of them whispered something that wouldn't leave his mind for weeks. "Some betrayals don't happen in a moment," she said. "They happen over years in plain sight." And in Michael's case, that was exactly true. But the question that still haunted investigators was, why go that far? Why destroy the people closest to him? Why orchestrate something so devastating, only to watch it burn from the shadows? In his confession, Michael said one line that chilled everyone in the room. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't emotional. It was quiet, deliberate, like he'd rehearsed it. "I wanted him to feel small for once." That was it. Not money, not fame, not revenge for some grand betrayal. Just the satisfaction of watching another man, his best friend, crumble beneath the weight of his own life. It wasn't about winning. It was about breaking. Beat, distant echo of camera shutters, murmurs of a courtroom. When the news of Michael's arrest broke online, it spread like wildfire. Social media turned the story into a circus. Reaction videos, podcasts dissecting every message, every photo, live streams speculating on the real motive, debates about love, loyalty, and the psychology of betrayal. Everyone wanted an explanation, but explanations don't heal wounds. They just keep them open. And through it all, none of them, not the journalists, not the analysts, not even the so-called experts, captured the full picture. Because what happened after the headlines faded was far darker, far quieter. Daniel was left with something heavier than anger. He was left with guilt, the kind that doesn't leave bruises, but lives inside you like a parasite. He'd loved them both in different ways. Michael, the brother he never had. Isabella, the woman who'd once made every morning feel like a promise. And now, both were gone. Isabella left town. No farewell, no statement, no tearful goodbye. She didn't run, she vanished, like a ghost deleting herself from the story. The apartment she once shared with Daniel stood empty, just walls that still carried her perfume, and a mirror she'd forgotten to take. Journalists tried to find her. They traced bank records, travel logs, hotel bookings, nothing, until one intern, buried in an old forum thread, stumbled across a message. It was posted from an anonymous account, 3 days before Isabella disappeared. It read, "Not all lies come from strangers." No one knew what it meant, but Daniel did, because even though Michael had orchestrated everything, even though the scandal was built on manipulation and deceit, there was one truth Daniel could never escape. The affair still happened. The videos didn't lie. The emotion, the closeness, the whispered moments between two people who should have known better. They were real. Michael may have planted the seed, but Isabella watered it. And that realization, that quiet, excruciating truth, shattered Daniel more than any footage, any betrayal, any court verdict ever could. Michael was sentenced to 5 years for invasion of privacy, blackmail, and emotional manipulation. 5 years that would never balance the scale. Evelyn, the producer who helped orchestrate the leak, served too. But justice, if you could call it that, fell hollow. Because what do years mean when trust has already been buried? Daniel disappeared again. No forwarding address. No trace of him online. Friends said he sold his remaining assets and moved abroad. Others claimed he was living under a different name. But the truth is, no one knew. He became a ghost haunting his own story. Then, months later, something surfaced. A letter sent to a production company that had once covered the scandal. No name, no address, just a single envelope, sealed with the same dark wax that once marked Isabella's letter. Inside, one handwritten line in black ink. You think it's over, but it never really was. There was no signature, no clue who sent it, but the handwriting. Some said it looked like Daniel's. Others swore it wasn't. The truth, again, was unclear. But what it did was reignite everything. Newsrooms reopened old files. Reddit threads lit up with theories. Some believed Isabella had resurfaced under a new identity. Others thought Michael had left behind a trail of confessions hidden in coded letters. And a few whispered the most unsettling theory of all, that the story everyone thought had ended was only the first act of something much bigger. Because in every story of betrayal, there's always another secret waiting in the dark, a motive deeper than jealousy, a wound older than love. And this one was just beginning to reveal itself. If you're still watching, type "I'm still here" in the comments, because what comes next might just change everything you thought you knew about this story. 6 months had passed since Michael's conviction. The world had moved on. The trending hashtags faded. But for those at the center of it, the scars were still fresh. Daniel lived quietly, far from the noise, in a coastal town no one could pronounce. No social media, no interviews, just silence until the letter arrived. It came without a name or return address, just a plain envelope, sealed with wax. Inside was a single photo. It was Isabella, standing on a cliff, looking out over the ocean, and written on the back were 3 words: "We need to talk." Daniel froze. He hadn't seen or heard from her since the day of the scandal. Part of him wanted to ignore it, but the other part, the one still searching for closure, couldn't. 2 days later, he drove to the location printed on the postmark, a quiet coastal cafe outside Lisbon. The place looked abandoned, the kind of spot where time itself had stopped caring. And there she was, Isabella, different, older, quieter, shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she saw him, she smiled, not the way she used to, but with sadness. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crashing of waves and the hum of a broken neon sign above the cafe door. Then Isabella broke the silence. "You deserve to know the truth." Daniel said nothing. He just listened. She explained everything. The affair, the guilt, the manipulation. But then she said something that made Daniel's chest tighten. Michael wasn't working alone. Daniel looked up, and for the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. He was helping someone else, someone who wanted to ruin me, not you. According to Isabella, months before the wedding, she had been receiving anonymous messages, threats, photos of her meeting Michael, ones that hadn't even happened yet. Someone was predicting her actions before she made them. At first, she thought it was a prank. Then, one message changed everything. "You'll do it, because if you don't, Daniel will pay for what he did." She told him about the messages first. Anonymous, precise, and increasingly insistent. At first, they were strange little notes sent to her phone. A photograph of her leaving work. A captioned screenshot of a text she never sent. A vague threat cloaked in casual language. "Watch yourself." One read, "People see things you don't know about." She laughed once, a small, brittle sound. When she told him she'd assumed a jealous ex had been behind it. She thought it was petty, nothing more than mean attention. Then she said the part that made the color drain from Daniel's face. The photos of meetings that hadn't happened yet. She remembered the first time it occurred, a morning email with a photo attached. Her sitting with Michael at cafe table, their heads close, an intimacy staged to look candid. It was dated 2 days in the future. She swore she had not yet met him that day. When the meeting happened, the scene looked eerily like the image she had been sent. Someone had been predicting her moves, or worse, writing them. At first, she thought a coincidence. Later, she realized how impossible that was. "Someone was directing us," Isabella said, the words fragile as glass. Like actors on a set who didn't know they were being filmed. Like someone had the script before we did. She told him about the crescendo, a message that arrived 6 weeks before the wedding. It was short and merciless. "You'll do it, because if you don't, Daniel will pay for what he did." She remembered the exact time, 2:12 a.m. Her hands had shaken when she read it. The implication was clear and corrosive. Comply, or the man you love will be ruined. Daniel blinked. He felt something inside him shift, a slow, hot discomfort that was part rage, part guilt. "What he did?" he asked, voice small. Isabella lowered her eyes. For a moment she seemed younger, as if the weight of those months pressed her back into an earlier self. "There are things you did not tell me," she said quietly. "Decisions in the business that ruined a man. I found out later. I never meant for any of this to happen. But once the seed was planted, someone else watered it. She spoke then of meetings in shadow corners, of a figure who watched from a distance and left gifts of evidence like a trail of breadcrumbs. Old invoices, bank transfers labeled with innocuous words, a name that kept reappearing in the margins. Victor Hale. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. He'd heard it in a sentence before, a brief mention in a passing conversation at a dinner party. Nothing more. Now, the way Isabella spoke, it felt dangerous. A word with teeth. He promised answers, she continued. If I played along, if I made a mistake, he suggested, he would stop. He said he wanted things fixed, that Daniel deserved to pay for walking away from his partnership. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup until the porcelain creaked. I thought I could stop it. I thought I could control it by playing the part he wanted. But someone else was always one step ahead. Daniel's chest tightened. Images flooded him. The business meetings he'd tried to forget, the long nights he'd spent bargaining for survival, the gnawing sense that some consequences could never be fully escaped. For a long moment he was speechless, not with shock, but with the terrible clarity that he had been both the architect and the victim of a plan that had devoured him. Outside, the waves argued with the shore, relentless and indifferent. Inside, Isabella's voice lowered to a whisper. He told me the last time we spoke, if you love him, you will do this. If you don't, we'll make sure he loses everything anyway. She folded it on herself as if the memory were a wound. I chose the lesser of two wrongs. There was no theatrical reconciliation, no cinematic torrent of forgiveness. Just two exhausted people sitting across from each other, bent by a storm that had been engineered in secret. Daniel realized in that long, terrible hour that the betrayal had been both a private choice and a public setup. A tragedy written by someone else that used their desires and faults like instruments. When he left the cafe, the sky had bruised into evening. He carried the photograph in his pocket as if it might burn him. He had come seeking closure, and he left with more questions than answers. But one thing was suddenly clear. Whatever justice meant now, it would not be simple. The wrongs here were layered, personal and procedural, intimate and strategic. And somewhere out there, Victor Hale, a name now lodged in both their mouths like an accusation, still moved in the shadows, the architect of cruelty that had cost him everything. To this day, no one knows where Victor Hale is. The footage still circulates online, millions of views, millions of opinions. But the truth? It's hidden in the spaces between what we see and what we choose to believe. Because every betrayal starts long before it's caught on camera. So now I'll ask you, was justice ever truly served? Or was everyone just another victim in someone else's story? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want to hear what happened in Victor Hale's next scheme, you might want to stay subscribed. Because the next story is even darker. Daniel was confused. What he did, he demanded answers, but Isabella hesitated. It wasn't just your friendship with Michael that broke him, she said. It was the deal you made. 3 years earlier, Daniel and Michael had started a business together, a real estate venture. But when the company began to fail, Daniel pulled out, secretly selling his shares to a competitor. That decision left Michael bankrupt, homeless, and while Daniel rebuilt his life, Michael swore he'd never forgive him. But what neither of them knew was that the competitor who bought those shares was funded by Isabella's ex-fiancé, a man named Victor Hale. Victor had been quietly following Isabella's life for years after she left him. Obsessed, controlling, he wanted her happiness to fall apart, piece by piece. So he found Michael, a man broken enough to be used, angry enough to be dangerous, and desperate enough to destroy. Victor supplied the money, Michael supplied the plan, and Evelyn supplied the camera. Together, they orchestrated everything. The affair, the footage, the leak, a revenge plot wrapped in heartbreak, played out like a documentary. When Daniel heard it, his world shattered all over again. Everything, the betrayal, the scandal, the humiliation, had been manufactured. He wasn't the victim of love gone wrong. He was a pawn in someone else's obsession. Isabella broke down as she spoke. She told him she hadn't loved Michael, that she felt trapped, manipulated, blackmailed, and watched. She showed him the final message she received from Victor before disappearing. Now you'll understand how it feels to lose everything you love." And beneath those words, a photo of Daniel's car parked outside her apartment. Taken the night of the betrayal, Victor had been there, watching, filming. Daniel sat back, realizing the cruel irony. He destroyed Isabella's life in revenge for something she'd never truly done her own will. He had become the very thing he despised, a weapon used by someone else's hatred. For a long while, neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Finally, Isabella whispered, "He's still out there, Daniel." Victor Hale had vanished 2 days before Michael's arrest. Interpol issued a warrant, but his trail went cold. Rumors suggested he was living under a new identity, running new schemes, targeting new victims. But Daniel didn't care about justice anymore. He just wanted peace. He stood, looked at Isabella one last time, and said, "We both lost everything because of him. But maybe that's how we start again." She nodded. Tears fell quiet, unplanned. And then she walked away, out of the cafe, out of the story, for good. The sun dipped below the horizon as Daniel watched her leave. And for the first time, there was no anger, no bitterness, just silence. Sometimes closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from accepting that some questions were never meant to be solved.